Alright, so this bookcase is pretty awesome. I want to design a functional piece that also lent itself to be a piece of art. And this bookcase allows you to make different layouts and patterns depending on what your needs and wants are. Because you can change the layout however and whenever you want. So let's get started on the modular boxes. With my plywood cut down into more manageable slices, I took the sheets over to the table saw to cut them down to their final width. These cuts will ultimately be the depth of all the boxes. So I set my fence once and cut the 2 sheets into 18 sections. Now, as I said, these boxes are modular with an inside angle that allows them to nest. So I needed to make 18 total boxes even though some of the designs only require 16. Just like socks, when you think you have enough, add 2 more. From there I set up my crosscut sled with a stop to cut the 2 even side sections out first. Doing this allowed me to keep the stop locked in place, allowing for less chance of errors. I cover the layout for these sections in the cut list of the project plans, which are linked in the description for anyone who's interested. With my first set of side pieces cut out, I moved my stop and cut out the box bottoms. I like wearing gloves when working with rough plywood, but I know that's a no-go for some people. What do you think? Do you wear gloves in the shop? Let me know down in the comments.
Next, I trimmed off the factory edges from my boards because the factory edges are as good as bargain store sushi, which leaves me with 4 clean edges on all of my panels. Any remaining rough edges will be trimmed off when I do the 45-degree miters in a minute.
So with my blade set to 45, I cut the first set of miters on the inner box pieces. These angles are what allow the boxes to nest as well as create the diamond-shaped shelves. And with the first miter cut, I reset the fence and cut the second miter. When cutting miters like this, it's a good idea to do a test cut as the angled edges will make your fence measurements shorter than they actually are. Then finally I cut the bevels for the long sides of the box. These bevels will meet at the transition between the box side and the inner angled edge. Next it was time for assembly of the box sides. I did this in 3 different steps to help sequence out the process, and first up was the mitered inner wall. I like using blue tape to hold the joint tight while gluing. Since there are a lot of these boxes to make and I don't have an endless supply of clamps, I used some CA glue and accelerator to hold the joint closed while the wood glue dried. Then with the help of a clamping square, I held the joint tight until the CA glue was set and then repeated the process until I had 18 mitered corners. Next I assembled the remaining 3 sides. Since the faces of the box interior will be difficult to reach once the boxes are complete, I went ahead and sanded those before assembly. Here I'm using the clamped square from Rockler to hold the joints square while I glue them up. These things are like a third hand in the shop. I'll have them linked in the description along with any other items in this video. A few 23 gauge nails help pin the joint closed while the glue dries, and just like Groundhog Day, I could repeat the process 18 times. These sriracha bottles are great for fine glue lines, but I know there are a lot of bottles out there, so let me know if you have any others that are worth trying down in the comments. The mitered sections fit in pretty easily because the box side is already square and there was no need for clamps. Just a push here, pull there, and it was all lined up. With the assembly complete, I could sand all the outside faces and edges of the boxes to 220. I wanted to keep the hard edges on the box, but I did take some time to sand them back so they weren't razor sharp. Whenever I'm sanding veneer, I make a mental note about how much time I have spent on each section. Otherwise, I risk sanding through the veneer, exposing the inside layers. So kinda like the quantum realm, watch your time here closely. And hey, if you're enjoying this build, give this video a like. It lets YouTube know to show this video to other people and helps me out a ton. Thank you.
Next I could start on the case that holds the boxes. I did this once all the boxes were done so that I could assemble them and build the case off the inside dimension, adding about 1/8 of an inch so the boxes could easily slide in and out when changing the design.
One thing I had to consider was leaving enough space inside the case for the LED strip as well as the rabbet for the back panel. And for the boxes to slide in and out correctly, this case needed to be perfectly square. So with the sides all cut down to their final width, I started on the miters. For long miters like these, I like to cut them with a crosscut sled and sneak up to the final length. After measuring the boxes for the case's inside dimension, I just added another 23/32 to each end for the plywood thickness. I also grain matched the pattern of the panels up to create that waterfall edge around the outside of the case. I make projects like this all the time, so if you're enjoying this one, subscribe to see more. Thanks for your support. Since this box is pretty large, I added some dominoes into the miters to help hold the joints together while I glued everything up, which is great because glue-ups can stress me out more than Tarantino and From Dusk Till Dawn. The last thing I had to do was add a 1/4" rabbet to the rear edge for the back panel. When I'm gluing up long miter joints, especially when working with veneer, I like to add some blue tape to the inside of the joint. This just helps to avoid any squeeze out that would need to be cleaned up later on. And I like to use glue with a long working time, so this Type Bond 2 Extend is perfect for case work. To help hold the long side panels vertical and square, I turned back to the clamping squares. Oh, and if you're looking for something a little more traditional, check out my mid-century modern bookcase build linked in the card above. With the corners clamped in place, I added 2 strap clamps to hold the joints tight and retain those perfect miters. From there I could remove the tape and attach the back panel with glue and brad nails. This back panel prevents the case from racking when the boxes are removed, and it gives the LEDs something to bounce off of, so it's kind of like the man behind the curtain.
I next added some edge banding to the case to hide the plywood edge. Now I didn't have any scrap wood long enough to make the edge banding, so I milled down a piece of 8/4 walnut and cut 2 1/8" strips off the edge.
I've trimmed out edge banding on a ton of projects, and this process is definitely my go-to now. I find that using a featherboard as a stop gives me the most consistent results. At this point the strips are about an 1/8" oversized, so that I can flush trim them with a palm router once they've been attached. When attaching edge banding, I find it easiest to work my way around the box, cutting one end, then marking out the angle for each cut as I go around. When working with walnut, I tend to use Type Bond 2 Dark. I don't know that it really hides squeeze out any more than normal glue does since I sand it back anyway, but better safe than sorry. To hold and clamp the edge banding in place, I just add a few strips of blue tape to each section. Have I mentioned that I go through a ton of blue tape? And once again I turn back to blue tape to protect the veneer from the flush trim bit bearing. This also adds a tiny bit to the edge banding that can be sanded flush when finished sanding the box. Much like before, I'm careful to only sand until the edge banding is flush, so I don't go through the veneer. The last thing was to drill a 1/2" hole to feed the LED strip through, then I could leave my mark.
To finish the bookcase, I went with a flat polyurethane to keep the plywood looking, well, flat. This will protect the plywood without giving it any sheen, making the final product look more like natural plywood.
To apply the finish, I use an HVLP spray gun. Doing this allowed me to have an even finish and save me hours of work. So if you're on the fence about trying spray finishes, I would say jump off and join the party. You'll definitely get there earlier with a spray finish. The case got a coat of wax to both darken the piece and bring out the richness of the walnut veneer. Now this is my first time using these LED strips, but they went on super easily using the adhesive backing. I don't know how long these strips will actually last, so your mileage may vary. Then it was time to unleash this bookcase's inner TikTok, so give it a like. Subscribe for more awesome woodworking projects and share this video with your friends. Watch this video next for another sweet project, and I'll see you next time.